Hello, and welcome to the Coach Right podcast, where we explore how to turn coaching expertise into published pages. I'm your host, Helen O'Neill, portfolio career specialist, author, and creator of Coach Right, the writing space and program specifically designed for coaches. You can get the episode show notes and your free guide to publishing options at coachright.co.uk. It's time for the next chapter. Welcome to the Coach Right podcast. Helen here, recording on Saturday, the 13th of June, 2026. And this is episode 26. Today, I'm speaking with Averil Price, all about her book, The Legacy Coach. And one of the things we talk about in the interview is how important it is to recognise a legacy as it's happening. So many of us have a purpose that's aligned to leaving a legacy in some sort of way, but we often overlook the value in sharing our journey as a way to leave the ladder down as we're climbing it, rather than waiting until we reach the top. The other thing that I really liked about the way Avril approached her writing process was that she gathered feedback on the book while she was writing it. She looked to gather critique, and she also looked at the tools and techniques that she was including within the book that she then pulled through into her signature program. This is a really wonderful way of getting a support group, motivation, and that all-important feedback all in one go. It's a fantastic interview, and I'm sure you'll get a lot out of it. We are right in the middle of conference season. The CIPD Festival of Work took place this Wednesday and Thursday at the Excel Centre in the UK. It's one of the largest HR events of the conference calendar, and unfortunately, it's the first time in 3 years that I've not been able to attend. In previous years, it's been a wonderful place to connect with peers and clients, as well as to tap into the dialogue that's taking place in the HR community. This year, it clashed with the Self-Publishing Show Live, which was held on Thursday and Friday. So while theoretically I could have squeezed in a day of the CIPD event and still attended SPS Live, realistically, I had to make a choice. And this is often the thing that we're faced with when we have a portfolio career. We have client commitments, we have business commitments, we have learning and development priorities. We want to do all of the networking, and something has to give. I chose SPS because I knew that the learning I'd get from the conference, I wouldn't be able to get anywhere else. And I will be bringing that directly to my clients here at Coach Right. The independent publishing space pushes the frontiers of publishing, and I often find there are synergies with the coaching space. There are people there that are doing advanced marketing and business growth and are doing things that simply aren't talked about outside of the community. So while I find the connection incredibly valuable at CIPD, the conversation isn't as advanced, and that's why I made my choice. Next week, in the footnotes, I will collate all of my reflections and lessons learned on the event and share those directly with you. As you can imagine, I am still processing after 2 full days of interactions. You may well hear a slight croak in my voice today. I have done a lot of talking over the past 48 hours as I've met vendors, other authors, and listened to industry leaders who completely blew my mind. I am taking the next few days to reflect and look at what I'm going to be prioritizing in my author business, as well as I say, thinking about how I can bring some of that expertise to you. So make sure to watch out for the footnotes next week. Before I headed to the self-publishing show, I jotted down some of my lessons from attending various conferences and events over the past few years. And I thought it might be useful, as we are right in the heart of the season, to share some of those lessons with you ahead of today's interview. So the first thing, and it links quite neatly to the topic of choice, is leaning into the joy of missing out. That choice I made this week between 2 events was not an easy choice to make, but it also wasn't the only choice I made. The self-publishing show is held in central London. I live in the suburbs, and so commuting in for both days is the sensible thing to do. What that means is that I have to factor in an additional time and energy cost if I opt into any things like pre-conference breakfasts or post-conference drinks. So, for example, there was the option to attend a boat trip along the River Thames on the evening of the first day of the conference. Fantastic idea. Didn't start till 7:30 p.m. The event finished at 5 p.m. Now, there was an early docking at 9 and a late docking. So I knew that if I attended, first of all, I'd have to hang around for 2.5 hours with nothing to do before the boat trip started. And then even if I got off at the first docking stop, I probably wouldn't get home until about 10:30 if I was lucky with the trains. And then I'd need to be up again at ridiculous o'clock the following day to come back into London and attend. Doable, not necessarily enjoyable. I know from previous events that by the end of the day, I am peopled out. So I'm really happy to hang around for an hour or two after the main event to decompress and compare notes with other attendees. But what I absolutely don't want to be doing is being trapped on a boat when I can't leave and being worried about being tired. So I made a decision not to go. I heard it was brilliant. Loads of people had a great time. But what I did instead was pop to the pub on the way home with a couple of other authors for a quick drink, grabbed the train and was in my pajamas on my sofa by 7:30, feeling very happy with my life choices. Neither of these is better or worse. The point is, you have to choose. You might well be able to do all of the things. And if that's you, then great. But if you're like me and you need some quiet time, make sure you factor it in. There is joy in missing out, and you will enjoy the experience far more. The second thing is being really clear about what you want to get out of the event that you're attending. What are your key takeaways going to be? There's always a balance to be made between inputting new information and connecting with other people. For some, back-to-back learning sessions are too much. It can also be really tempting to go to loads of really interesting sessions about shiny new things that are absolutely not relevant to you and where you are on your journey. Now, that might be your career journey or your business journey or your author journey. When I put that into context for the self-publishing show, I am not planning on doing Facebook ads in the next year. My audience is on Amazon, and so my focus is there. Therefore, I did not attend the session on advanced Facebook ads. I highly respect the person that ran the session, and apparently it was brilliant, but it wasn't relevant to me, so I chose a different track. On the opposite side of things, I'm really curious about Kickstarter. You might recall I spoke to Holger Niels Paul on episode 21 about his experience of running a crowdfunding campaign, and it's been on my mind ever since. I'm just dabbling with being a backer so I can see what the process looks like from a buyer perspective and considering whether or not I have the bandwidth to do one this year or whether I need to wait until next. So I made sure that I attended the Kickstarter session. It's also worth considering whether you want to spend some time in what we call the hall track. When we say that you go to an event and you network and you meet loads of people and peers and it's all about community and yada, 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 that's really easy to say when you've been multiple times before and you walk into a room and you've got familiar faces to connect with. When it's your first event or maybe your second, it can be quite intimidating to walk into that room. These are generally busy spaces that can quickly become overstimulating. And as a quick tip, if you are someone who gets sensory overload, it's really worthwhile to bring your noise suppressing earphones with you. There are normally tracks for learning. Some events will have a single track, and what that means is that you and everybody else go to the same thing. There's one big conference space and everybody listens to the same speakers. Sometimes there are multiple tracks. You can see this at the CIPD, actually. There are loads. I think there are normally 10 to 15 different stages, all with different speakers on at similar times, talking about different things. And you have to choose which session you want to go to. At SPS, they do a blend of the two. On day one, it was a single track. and everybody saw the same stuff. On day 2, they had 4 tracks, and you had to choose which sessions you wanted to attend. Not everyone goes to all of the talks. Some people hang out in the hall, so to speak. And this can be a good opportunity to build deeper connections. Also, it's a really good time to use if there are vendors that you want to speak to and maybe their table is really busy. During the breaks, it's likely to be much quieter. And if you haven't got a pre-booked meeting with them, it can be a great chance to go and have a conversation. You will notice that there isn't a stand in the corner checking your email track. So do try to bear that in mind when you attend. No matter how tempting it is to retreat to the comfort of the screen, that isn't why you're there. So keep your phone in your bag and spend the event talking to real people. The last tip is to factor in downtime after the event. I won't lie, I am exhausted today. Recording this podcast is the only thing I plan to do with my day other than rest and reset. My mind is absolutely buzzing with information and ideas, and I'm taking a quiet day to reflect, to take a breath, and to reground. But first, let's move on to our interview today with the wonderfully generous and incredibly knowledgeable Averil Price. It's time for the next chapter. Welcome to the Coach Right podcast. My guest today is Averil Price, founder of AV Consultancy, where she works with senior leaders across sectors. She's passionate about helping people pause, recognise the impact they've made, and step into their next chapter with clarity and intention. Her debut book is The Legacy Coach, Your Next Chapter, Your Legacy, Your Way. Welcome to the show, Averil.
Thanks, Helen. It's lovely to be here.
I'm really looking forward to our conversation today. So if you can start by telling listeners a bit more about you and your path to publication.
Yeah, so as you said, I'm Averil. I founded AV Consultancy back in 2018, and then I started working through the consultancy full time when I left my role in local government, just coming up to 4 years ago. So I spent over 30 years in local government, much of that as a senior leadership level. But now my work focuses on leadership development, coaching, and what I describe as legacy thinking. So what I aim to do is to help people step back, recognise the impact they've already had, and consciously shape what comes next. So I talk a lot around intentionality, and how they can, align what's come before into where they want to go in the future. And I guess my path to writing came from that space, my own journey of pausing, reflecting and rebuilding after a life-threatening brain hemorrhage in January 2020. And also from my experience of working with so many talented leaders in the public sector who are constantly focused on what's next, whether that's targets, delivery, pressure, but really rarely sought to acknowledge what they've already achieved. So very much that treadmill of, we've got to keep going, but actually not pausing to think, actually, there's been some great achievements along the way. So my book, The Legacy Coach, was born from that gap, really. It's about helping people pause, reflect, and then move forward with that intention. And whether that's a promotion, whether it's a career pivot or some sort of retirement. And writing the book just felt like a natural extension of my own transition from local government leader into coaching and leadership development. And it's another way of reaching people who might not step into a coaching conversation, but still need that space to think.
Absolutely. There is an awful lot, I'm sure, that listeners will resonate with what you've just talked about. A lot of us have had that senior role, haven't we, in some sort of organisation for a number of decades. And then there is a transition time or a pivot of some sort. And it would be remiss of me not to notice that you had a life-changing situation within that pivot experience. So talk to us a little bit more about your career change and then how that led to the business that you have today.
So I guess the brain hemorrhage in 2020 was one of those moments where, your loved ones are being told, we don't really know what the future holds. First 48 hours was crucial. Thankfully, I came through that. But the phased return to work was really difficult because it happened during COVID. So everything was on a screen, which when you've got a brain trauma was not great.
It's not ideal. Yeah.
It wasn't ideal. And I think because of my natural instinct was, to try and push myself back into work, on occasions I pushed myself too quickly. And then that ended up with a bit of a relapse. So I think it took about 12 months before I really felt back to normal. And then I got back into the workplace and I think I'd changed. The world had changed. My thoughts about my job had changed. My thoughts around what was priorities in my life had changed. And pretty soon I started to think, I'm not sure if this is wise from a health point of view to continue working at a director, deputy chief exec level in local government. But also, what did I want life to look like moving forward? So together with my partner, we sort of sat down and discussed a range of options, talked them all through, looked at the pros and cons, and decided actually that we would move, we would relocate back to Wales, where I was born, and we would start to develop some joint working through the business that was already in place and was there in the background. And it seemed natural to me that, with my connections with Solace, which is the local government membership body in local government, that I'd always had a passion around succession planning, developing the potential in people. I was already a qualified coach. I already had mentored, tens of people, it just felt like a natural move into that space, really. And I was really grateful to, Wealdon District Council that I was working for at the time, provided me with a consultancy contract straight away to be able to continue supporting their senior and middle managers, and to Solace for stepping in and actually asking me to facilitate some programs straight away. So it didn't feel like I was jumping completely off a cliff, although it was still quite scary.
Absolutely. So you've got these pillars of this new career in place. And then you think, I haven't had enough on my plate. I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to write a book.
Exactly. You just down to a T, that is, Helen. That's me. I'm always looking for the next little project. So I decided to write a book. And I guess part of me wanted to capture my own journey, but I didn't want a book that was just a memoir. I realized that there were so many people that reach a point in their career where they feel unsettled. For me, the transition was more due to a life-changing situation. But when I was talking to people, there were people that were just at a bit of a crossroads. And it wasn't that they were feeling unsettled because they'd failed, but actually it was because they'd achieved a lot, but they didn't really know how to process that, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And we talk a lot, don't we, of senior leaders about ambition, but I don't think we talk enough about reflection. So I wanted to create something that was practical, something that was accessible, that helps people recognize their legacy as it's happening, not just at the end of their career. But I suppose being a bigger picture thinker, I was always thinking publishing a book would enhance my business brand. I was I suppose, positioning myself as the legacy coach, and talking very much on socials around, what legacy coaching meant. So in my mind, there was this product, there was this book that it could act as a very large business card, shall we say, so that, there was something there that validated the work that I was doing as a legacy coach, that when I went along to talk to new clients, I had a product I could give them, actually, that said, actually, this works. And so I suppose that's something we can maybe come back to a little bit later. But the core message really in the book is that your legacy isn't something you leave behind. It is something you're building every single day. And when you take time to understand that, you can make better, more aligned decisions to what comes next. So it's really for people who are at a transition point. Often senior leaders who are asking, what next? Is this still right for me? What do I want to be known for? But also for anyone that wants to be more intentional about their impact.
Yeah. You can probably hear the smile in my voice, because so often when people talk about writing a book, it is a form of leaving a legacy. And what I love is that you've captured that within your book in leaving your own legacy and helping other people to identify how they can proactively work towards leaving their own. And so I love the fact that that's all brought together. And I do wonder, actually, maybe it is a good time to talk around how that book fits in with your business model today, because again, I think we quite often talk about starting with the end in mind, and you've very much created a business and a product and an asset that aligns very closely to the services that you deliver today. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so I'm very mindful of when I am coaching, and I think people seek me out now because they want somebody that will help them to do that pause in that reflection. So I tend to get clients coming to me that are at that crossroads, that they want to make some transition, but they like, I suppose they like the fact that I will encourage them to stop and actually think, how have I got to where I am now? What are my strengths? What am I passionate about? What gets me up in the morning? What are my priorities? What are my values? And do that piece of work before we even start thinking about where do I want to go. And one of the products that has definitely come as a spin-off, I suppose, from the book is a new program that I'm facilitating for Solace, called Rise and Renew, which is really focused on people from two sides, really. People that are seeing they still want to rise into a new role, and particularly with local government reorganisation in England at the moment, there's huge opportunities for people that are going to be moving from smaller councils into large unitary councils. So helping them through that process. But also on the renew side, there'll also be lots of people who are actually seeing local government reorganisation as an opportunity to renew and to do something different. And whether that is moving to a different sector, whether it's moving into some sort of portfolio career, or retirement, and what does that look like? So I created a course for Solace, which is based on individual coaching, group coaching, and a 2-day residential retreat. And we've capped the numbers at sort of 8 to 10 on each cohort. So that it's really powerful in terms of a small group coming together of strangers from across the country, across the UK, and coming into a really safe space and actually showing that vulnerability, and really digging deep in terms of where they've come from, where they are now, and where do they want to get to. And so we're in the middle of the first program at the moment, and the second program will start again in the autumn. And the feedback from that has been phenomenal so far. And I think we've definitely hit on a gap in the market, which I think people are really enjoying.
Amazing. And that's the secret sauce, isn't it, when we're coaching? It's to find your niche and then really double down on it and serve the community that you are within. So fantastic. Let's talk a little bit more about the process of writing the book. So how did you go about it?
So I think I was always one of those people who said, I've got a book in me.
I know quite a few of those.
But I was never really sure what that book was going to look like or when I was going to write it. However, as you said, when I left local government and I left my local authority role in November 2022, I started to think, look, stop talking about this. If now's not the time, when is going to be the time? So having moved back to Wales, I'd lived in England since going to university when I was 18. So I'd arrived back in Wales and I was busy making new connections, both work and personal, as part of embedding myself back here, really. And I'd arranged a coffee with a lady called Lisa Knight Davis, who works for Monmouthshire County Council. We'd met on an online Teams call that I'd somehow got myself invited to. And I just felt instantly there was a little bit of a connection on the screen. So I reached out to Lisa, found that she was only living 15 minutes away from me. So we arranged for coffee. And I found myself telling Lisa during that coffee that I had a kernel of an idea for a book on legacy coaching. And she responded by saying, send me chapter 1.
Oh, I like her.
Yeah. And so that was really the start of my journey, to get my thoughts down on paper, because I got an accountability partner. And alongside this, I joined a writing group, which was hosted by my local independent bookshop called Bookish in Crickhowell. And this served a number of purposes as well. It connected me with other writers. Some were published authors. Some were just people who enjoyed creative writing. It stretched my creativity as well, because my writing was very much in the non-fiction, factual, and doing some of the writing exercises in the group just took me way outside my comfort zone. But also it was another layer of accountability, because I told them that I'd started writing a book. So of course they were always asking me, how are you getting on? So it was that other level of, of progress, really. So I had a rough outline of the chapters worked out, and then I started to write and started to send Lisa each chapter in turn, because, after chapter 1, she said, let's have chapter 2 then. And she was so encouraging, she just kept saying, keep going. And then at some point, she came up with the idea that in order to help me test the content, how about getting together a small group of my target readers? So I reached out on LinkedIn and said, I'm looking for 6 willing volunteers to work with me, who are in the public sector, over a period of 6 months. And so 6 people came forward, some people that were in my network already, some people that I didn't know. And we set up 6 one-hour sessions over 6 months, and I would send them a draft chapter. They would read it during that time, and then they would come and tell me how they've implemented some of the content, but also they'd give me some feedback on which bits they found helpful and which bits they didn't. And that proved so useful, just to get some feedback from, the people who were going to be reading the book. But it also gave me that band of cheerleaders as well,
Yeah.
sort of, yeah, you can do this, keep going. And it kept me going to find the time to write as well, because, I didn't want to let them down, I suppose. So, and after working with them, I then had a final first draft. And at that point, I reached out for some professional support from a company that offered to match you to a mentor that would read your book and then provide written feedback on the manuscript, followed by a 2-hour mentoring session to run through their thoughts. This relationship was a disaster.
Oh dear, there was a big intake of breath, so I
Yeah.
wondered if it was going to have a happy ending. What happened?
I just didn't feel a connection to this person at all. And as a complete novice, I just found their feedback was overcritical, and it wasn't constructive, and it certainly wasn't delivered with empathy. And, I took a lot of learning from that. But I was pretty despondent afterwards. And I think without the band of cheerleaders that I had around me and the support of my partner, I was ready to give up at this point. I had a copy of the manuscript printed off, and I just put it in a cupboard and just left it there and thought, nah, this isn't gonna happen. But eventually you start, people were reaching out to me, and I didn't want that person to win. So there was a bit around, actually, I'm going to prove that person wrong. And at that point, I reached out to a lady called Sian Ellen Flint-Friel, who is a book mentor and editor that was already working with a lady that I knew. So somebody that I admire and respect completely, a lady called Sandra Wiles, former local government chief exec, who was writing her own coaching book called the Coaching Tools Compendium. She was already working with Sian Ellen. So I set up a meeting with her just to see whether that was somebody else I could work with. And we had a bond straight away. It was, she's so warm and encouraging. And I knew that working with her that the book would be born.
Amazing.
So it was, it felt like a massive relief. And I knew there was lots of work to do to the first draft, but I just needed some help with shaping it. And Sian helped me to do that. So I chose to self-publish. I wanted to keep control over the message, the design, and the timing. So I had sessions with Sian every sort of 4 to 6 weeks, during which we went through the content, rewording, editing, and my writing improved significantly with her mentoring. And then once we had a complete manuscript, Sian completed the final edit, and then we engaged a lady called Michelle Catanach, who did the typesetting and the design. And as I say, for me, it was always been probably less about having a book and more about creating someone that genuinely helps people. And within the brand of the legacy coach, I guess the book is now just one overall, it's one element of the overall package of support that I can, offer to, leaders in the public sector, and what they can receive from me.
Absolutely. I'd really like to just circle back on the story that you've just told around how important it is to have the right people in your publishing team. When people are looking at independently publishing, you're not going to do it all on your own, because none of us are writers, editors, typesetters, cover designers all in one bucket. We all need professionals around us, and finding
Absolutely.
the people that align with you is so incredibly important. And once you find that person, they are absolute gold. And it sounds like you've had both ends of the experience, haven't you? The not so great one, and then the absolute purpose alignment with your book mentor. So I'm pleased that you persevered with it, because it could have easily just stayed a book in the drawer. So congratulations for taking it out again and then persevering to getting it out into the world. I always ask everybody what lessons they've learned that they'd share with others. What would you say?
I think, the lesson, the lesson is, yes, you do need to have the right people around you. I think, I went to what I thought was a reputable company. And I think one of the things that I would have done with hindsight would have, before I'd sort of handed over any money for that, I would have spent a bit more time actually finding out who I was going to be matched with, and exactly, were there a range of options. So I suppose one of the things I do is, quite often when people are looking for a coach, they will have a range of chemistry meetings with different people.
Yeah.
I didn't do that in that respect. I went to a company, they matched me with somebody that they thought was going to be the right person. And I think one of the lessons that I learned was I didn't take enough control over that at the time. And, with hindsight, I would have said, I would like to talk to, maybe, 3 or 4 people to actually see if they're the right person to work with me. So I think that's the biggest, learning I think I would take from that situation.
Yeah, great advice. It's funny, isn't it? I often say there are parallels between writing and publishing and coaching, and there you've just articulated it perfectly. Have a discovery call with your team. Get a sample edit from a potential editor. I too have had very ranging experiences with my editing team in particular, where I worked with a proofreader on my first book, and I couldn't use what they sent me back. They introduced so many errors. I went back to my line edit and actually had to cross-reference things and put them back. So it's not uncommon to, as you're learning who to partner with, to have these bumps in the road. But your book is out in the world and has been online since November 25, I think I'm right in remembering.
Yeah, November, yes.
How do you get your books into the hands of readers?
I guess for me, it's about conversations, really. Okay. So whether that's sort of workshops, leadership programs, coaching sessions, these are the spaces where the book, really comes alive. So the residential retreat that I talked about, the Rise and Renew program, all the participants have a copy of the book as part of the the benefits of booking on that program. So it's all the courses that I do. I tend to have a box of books with me in the car. So whenever I'm facilitating something, I will talk about my book. And if somebody says, how can I get hold of a copy? I'll say, well, okay, I'll just happen to have some.
To the car.
But and I talk about the book on social media posts. So I haven't spent a huge amount of money on marketing the book. It's there. I think for me, it's that ripple effect. It's the people that I suppose were close to me in my network that have immediately bought the book and then reviewed it on Amazon. And then gradually other people will talk about that. So for me, it's conversations, it's word of mouth, it's that ripple effect that people talk about it as something that's helped them, and their connections hear them talking about it, and it moves on from there, really.
Yeah, absolutely. So often when I'm talking to newer authors, they think they can just put their book up on Amazon and the magic book buying fairies will come along and purchase it. Whereas, as you say, it's quite often with an asset that is so closely linked to your business model, it's those individual conversations, isn't it? It's like, say, I'm going to an event and I talk about my book and people ask me about my book, and that might generate, 5-10 sales. There are obviously ways to advertise and use social media in certain ways, but because of the purpose of the book being so closely aligned to your signature program, the whole piece is kind of self-perpetuating. So I really like the way that you're focusing on that in your model. And it would be remiss of me not to talk about the AI bit, because this story also goes along the same timeline as the emergence of AI. How, if at all, does AI feature in your process?
So I do use AI as a thinking partner, not as a writer, but it has helped me to structure ideas, sort of challenge my thinking sometimes, and refine language. So sometimes we tend to use the same words, and it's
Yes.
like trying to think, okay, let's expand my vocabulary a little bit here. But the voice and the experience within the book are all mine. And one thing I didn't speak about is that within the book there are a range of personal legacy stories from other people. So people that I know that have been through different transitions. And all their personal legacy stories in the book have come from genuine people, with their genuine stories and their lives. So I guess it's more as a thinking partner, just to test out some ideas, really.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny, isn't it? I do wonder if in 5 years we'll feel a little bit about AI the way that we did about the internet. We can't imagine not being able to look something up. The
Yeah.
overused words thing. Oh my goodness me. It's so helpful for that.
Yeah.
Things I didn't know I always say, but I do. And so this book is still relatively new in the world, but have you got the bug? Do you think you'll be writing another one?
I think so.
There was a big intake of breath there.
I think so. No, I really enjoy writing. I still go to the writing group in our bookshop, and I enjoy writing as a hobby, as a way of relaxing. I think I've got a couple of ideas bubbling around in my head at the moment. One of them is around poetry. And thinking about keeping with the legacy theme, but sort of legacy in verse. And I think we spoke about this a little while ago in terms of how that has some sort of overlap with somatic coaching. And how does the body feel, the poetry, I guess. So that's something that I've been, I suppose, playing around with a little bit, but haven't got too far in terms of anything down on paper. So I think when the time's right, I'll just see what emerges.
Love that. Absolutely love that. It's so funny, isn't it? When I started this podcast, I'd not really read any poetry since I was a teenager. And speaking to authors who are poets, who have published poetry and who use poetry in coaching, it's definitely reignited an interest in me in the medium as well. And I noticed that a lot of coaches are quite curious about it. So I think there's definitely a space for that thinking there.
Yeah, well, I had a poem published in an anthology a couple of months ago,
Congratulations.
which was really, really lovely to be involved in. So yeah, and it's something that I'd never really tried until last summer, and I went on a workshop which was around writing poetry, and I just got a bit of the bug for it, really. So yeah.
We'll have to compare notes offline on that. It's an interesting one. Avril, what myth would you like to demystify for the people listening?
I think in terms of making a transition or making the next step, I think the myth I'd like to dispel is that you don't have to have everything. Yeah, you don't have to have everything figured out before you make a change, but you just need to have enough clarity to take that first step.
Yeah. Wise words indeed. We so often come to change from a place of overwhelm, don't we? And it's that, what they call it, eating the elephant, one tiny, tiny, tiny piece at a time. Very wise words. Thank you so much for your time and for sharing your story. It's been absolutely inspirational. Can we close by sharing where people can find you, your services and your book?
Yeah, so you can find me. I've got website, so avconsultancylimited.co.uk, or on LinkedIn, where I share ideas around leadership and legacy. And my book is available on Amazon, as you say, The Legacy Coach. And yeah, I run leadership programs and coaching for senior leaders, particularly in local government. So, people are always welcome to get in touch for a conversation.
Thank you so much. I'll make sure all of those links are in the show notes. Thank you so much for your time. That's been brilliant.
No, it's been lovely chatting to you, Helen, and look forward to listening to the episode when it's live.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Wasn't that a wonderful conversation? So much to take away. Next week on the Footnotes, I will be sharing all of my reflections from the self-publishing show. I'll talk about my key takeaways from the sessions, the surprises that I learned along the way, and the moments of empathy that really stuck with me. I'll see you for the next chapter. Thank you for joining me today. You can get the show notes and your free guide to publishing options at coachwrite.co.uk. Remember to subscribe and leave a review on your podcatcher of choice. Your words can make a difference. A review can too. If you'd like to connect, find me on LinkedIn, O'Neill Helen. That's O'Neill, ONEILL, or on Instagram at coach_right. I'll see you for the next